work on a Epic of Earth. I think a lot of you may remember that from the Mythos Magic game, where he describes a very Earth-like fantasy world that most people have now taken to be the world next to Earth, and moving across it. Well, I spent a lot of time working on Yarth, which was the middle one, the one where magic and technology were about evenly divided. So that should show up in Visions of Greyhawk. I think of the issue after the coming one. I've got a few articles. The coming one too about the Underdark, talking about it in the Greyhawk campaign.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Underdark one.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
very, it may be over 100 pages. So it's going to be
Wow.
an enormous issue. Some highly detailed drow cities from other writers that I thought were masterful. I looked over them. I just thought they were terrific. Great work. This is not a cheapo production. I mean, people are really throwing it out, both in artwork and in writing and editing. So there's a lot of very high level stuff coming out. Very good.
I also will be having something coming out in the Underdark product.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Vision is very much.
Yes. Gary Holian's very slow at putting things out, though, because I think I wrote that thing like 2 years ago, and they're just now kind of getting around to polishing it. So I'm glad though, because to get Roger involved. Let's see, my brain's a little slow here. So Jay was talking about the community earlier. I need to know. Jay recognizes the faces. How many people here are regulars on his show? Watch his show. So we got a few. Okay. All right.
When I get time.
A little bit, that's all good.
Yeah.
So it's
All right.
fine, it's fine.
Yeah, the Army eats up my time sometimes.
It's okay.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
okay.
you go.
It's completely
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah.
I poured it to YouTube, so there's vids on YouTube. It stays
Yeah.
on Twitch for 90 days. There's YouTube vids. I don't edit them, so it's just I poured it right over. The only thing is you don't get the chat log on YouTube, but that's okay. I mean, at least you have it.
One
That's-
thing I wanted to ask earlier.
Yeah.
The heraldry on your shirt, I know it's your avatar on Twitch and Discord. I wanted to know like where exactly that heraldry is used in your campaign.
Very cool, very cool. Should I answer that now?
Please
Okay.
do.
So when I started in 1980, we all fall in love with two things: the Darlene map, right, and the heraldry on that folio. And I always wanted to have my own heraldry. So when we started, if you ever notice, I'm a west side of the map guy. Everyone goes, you don't play on the Great Kingdom east side of the map. I don't care about it, right? So that's the joke. On that side of the map, if you know, running from down through the Ulick States, down south of Sus Forest, there's this river, the Jewel River, that runs, and it separates the Pearl Marsh and the Prince Valley Ulick. There's nothing there. And as a little kid, I'm like, why is there nothing there? There's the humanoids on that one side, and there's the doors, and there's nothing there. There's no defenses, nothing when the Darlene map came out. So that's hence how the Order of Ulick got formed in my game in 1980. And that's the symbol. We got two weapons. We got a hammer of thunderbolts, cross of the Holy Avenger, and then that's the colors of the Order. And that's how. Now, we didn't have this symbol for a long time until Anna and Brian, if you ever remember Brian Blumklotz, started really getting together with heraldry. I had a black and white sketch drawing for all these years. And then, what did I say, 6 years ago, probably, 7 years
something
ago.
like that. Yeah.
It helped me just get it to this point, and then Anna's done much more high res. Now we have realistic looking shields, so that's how it came about. But it was always in my campaign since 1980, 45 years.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
Jay, I have a old campaign map of my.
There you go.
I brought a few of these. All right, so this is
You-
Sus Forest
You
and
can
everything.
we'll pass them around.
I will. I just wanted to say, like, this little part here, right here by my hand that you're seeing. See, Jay, there's this little part right here.
Yeah.
That's where.
That's where Altamira is.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
Nothing there.
There's
But,
nothing there, but you did a map where you put
yeah,
it on there, which I
got some maps
appreciated.
to show. Here's the first one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. That's really, I mean, Gary always said back then, make Greyhawk your own, right? And I took it to heart because those maps are so empty when you start playing back in the day. Now, when Living Greyhawk comes around, Anna's map is stuffed in a ton of areas. Make that Burbabonk and all the other places. Are these all second edition, Mike?
No, some of them are recent.
Recent, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think everyone doesn't understand the point that, like, oh, you don't homebrew. Well, that's the farthest thing from the truth. We all have our Greyhawk. We all homebrew our Greyhawk. It's the best homebrew of all. You get the best of both worlds. Use the
That's-
Greyhawk setting, and then you homebrew it.
That's honestly the reason why I fell in love with Greyhawk. It has this level of openness to where you could put the details in yourself and have
That's
your
it.
players mold the world. and
Yeah,
whatnot.
well, as soon as you start running your game, you start changing the setting, meaning they
Exactly.
race a town to the ground, or your villain starts doing things and stuff. So that means that you will have your own fork of Greyhawk as soon as you start. But it depends. If you run published modules and only, then I guess then you don't tweak with the setting, and that's a perfect, great way of running your games. But most of us, I guess, runs and keep tweaking and changing and adding, and the characters go around and they build their castles and they start doing all sorts of stuff. So yeah.
All right, one more map, everybody. So
Yeah.
Jay, here's the one, the Paraland.
Oh,
Can't
Oh,
do
see,
that.
that is unbelievable.
That
That's
is
new.
fantastic.
Okay, so I hand drew
Yeah.
this.
Come on, where
I
were
will
you
pass it
hiding all
around.
this stuff? Show us more of it.
Hand drawn.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I am in the process of coloring it, digitally coloring it. I'll
Yeah.
try to put it online, so y'all
We-
can
we're hoping
can
for
have this.
Oh, that looks, yeah, that looks
Pass that.
gorgeous. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
It's only that nice looking because I modeled it off of Anna's maps.
Yeah, so this is the latest version of the map. I'm
How big are
converting
each of
it-
these hexes?
What?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
How
that
big?
is ink paper. I
How
guess.
big is that?
Yeah,
That's,
the
those
larger
are 30
hexes.
mile the big hex is 30 miles, the small hex is
Okay,
5.
so that corresponds with Darlene.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, not done it. I'm retreated from or abandoned the Greyhawk tradition of having hexes. This map has squares, and it actually has two grids, two square grids, or almost square grids. There is a white grid that is 100 miles per square, and then there's black lines too, a black grid, and that's every 2 degrees. So you use the white grid to figure out the distance between things, and then you use the black grid to find things. And if you go to the edges of the map, this is the big version of the map, so you go to the edges of it, then you can see the latitude and longitude too. So you can see down here that thing is 4 degrees east, for example, and then this is just 100 miles. So that is why there's 2 grids on this one. So you can put in the latitude and longitude, and you can actually find it on the map that way, and use the white one just to figure out roughly this is 100 miles, or so that way you can use it. So
Really cool.
yeah, so that's part of the GIS. I took everything from Illustrator and now put it into GIS software. So now it's actually geo-referenced on the planet properly. So that way I can do many different versions and stuff. So they're different. This big map is using the Robinson projection. And I played around with all the different projections and found out that Robinson looks like the Darlene map the most, so to speak. So I picked it, and it's functioning. It's almost like Darlene had used the Robinson, so that way
It pops more.
yeah, it's okay. So I kind of
Yeah.
it a little bit distorted, because when you get into, let's see if we can find another one. I have one of the so we have the Bitter North, for instance. This one is ortho projection. So these are simply like seen from space. So it has as little distortion to the terrain as possible. And we should not have a 20-minute discussion of projections and cartography, but
Yeah,
the principle
that's
is that when you have a spherical planet and you turn that into a flat map, you will have distortion one way or the other. There's no way around it, so to speak. And normally you use these projected projections like Mercator or something, simply because that makes the map the lines, and you can use it to navigate using a compass, and that way you can navigate from point A to point B. So when you're a ship captain or navigator, or when you're flying or stuff, you need maps like that.
And how big is that? That thing's taking forever.
Well, it's about a couple of hundred megs. So, but it's the internet that is crappy.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, it's not the file that is big.
All right.
Yeah, comparatively.
So as you can see, we're going to bounce all over the place.
Yeah.
Right.
So I can. Yeah, I have
Yeah,
some other
as that's
stuff.
loading,
Yep.
so a question that has always come up for Roger
Yep.
is when you did the Greyhawk Adventure Begins, right? When you changed things
Yeah.
out.
Yes, sir.
What were your thoughts on? Yes, there it is. What was your thought on what do I got to do to fix things? I think that's what you had a whole. I think people. You said it to us once on our show. I think people would love to hear like what your thought process was.
Yeah. Was that a?
Yeah.
When I started working on The Adventure Begins, my main thought was to try and turn Greyhawk back into a playable campaign area. I wanted to bring it back to what Gygax had done with it originally. The big problem I saw was that with the Greyhawk Wars, you wound up with demons running wild across the landscape. And, you know, in certain areas, like I think Nyrond or something like that, had just enormous, you know, huge numbers of demons running around. You can't adventure and that kind of thing. It's just not possible. You can't have the village of Hamlet evolved and eaten. So what I wanted to do was undo some of the things. I wanted to call back Eus for one thing. I wanted to get rid of all the demons running around on the land for another thing. And I didn't want the Scarlet Brotherhood to totally take over everything below.
Wait.
Yeah, one of the big problems with any fantasy campaign system you have set up is that people like creating bad guys, infinite numbers of bad guys who have superpowers and who will wipe out the world if they cough wrong. You know, so it's just not helpful. So I came up with a way to kind of push Hughes back and get rid of the demons at the same time by having the Crooked Row show up. You know, there was everything that I thought I was using to undo, you know, what had been done with the Greyhawk Wars. It was actually already part of the campaign. The Crooked Row could get rid of the demons, and without the demons, Hughes had a lot of trouble. Then the kingdoms next to him were able to shove him back a little bit and then establish a stalemate. Some places were going to go. I mean, the rovers of the Barrens were not coming back. You know, a lot of these places, once they were gone, they were gone. But there was plenty to go around for everything that survived, so that worked out pretty well. The bandit kingdoms mostly survive in the Great Rift in that area, so there's still, you know, some room for that if anyone wants to run those. But the whole point was to try and make it more playable, reduce it more to a campaign area where you'd go adventuring from first level to 20th, you know, in whatever areas, kind of like it was in the beginning. I wanted to just set it all up so that a lot of the old names from the campaign would come back, basically just to kind of reset the clock on stuff without having to change any of what had already happened and everything. Now, Wizard of the Coast has actually completely reset Greyhawk, which is fine, and they've done a very nice job of it, I must say. So you can play in whatever section you want. I would say that having studied most of the other having worked at TSR and read over and worked with a lot of the other large properties as far as the campaign worlds, Greyhawk is one of the few that actually has a working timeline where you can see the physical and political changes going on from spot to spot, you know, over a large series of things. Unlike Dragonlance, it isn't dragged out of the, I hate to pick it, but it isn't dragged out of the, you know, prime material plane and then run off into the astral plane or wherever else it went. Deep ethereal plane. And unlike Forgotten Realms, it hasn't blown up one time too many and finally dissolved itself with the blue fire thing that went around and all that. It was kind of sad. I mean, Forgotten Realms actually had a playing campaign time of 20 years or less. If you count up from the time that it starts with the first box set for AD&D first edition to the final third edition thing, I think you've got like 20 years, and then it stops. So it makes it more difficult. But with Greyhawk, you can really run through, even if you've got demons running all over the land. There are ways to get around that. So I guess that's pretty much the main point I wanted to make. Just trying to reset the clock a little bit so that you could play every level.
Was there already talks of a living Greyhawk campaign down the line, or was that even part of that? Was that long before that was even in discussions? Was that part of the instruction?
Came after The Adventure Begins. That was the RPGA network, and I really didn't take I really didn't get involved very much in
Yeah.
the Living Greyhawk
So
campaign.
that was not part of the instructions, so to speak, to make it
Oh,
for.
not
yeah.
for me, no.
Yeah.
Actually, that's actually an interesting point. No,
Well, here's
I hadn't heard of it,
Yeah.
you know, for much of the time I spent writing on it and everything. So, but, you know, interesting point. Yeah,
Mhm.
the RPGA was able to carry Greyhawk on much further,
Yeah.
you know, and get it more. The one thing that I have to admit most appeals to me about Greyhawk was something you were saying, is that Gary Gygax very specifically said, "This is your world. You know,
Yep.
you do with it as you want." And he invested the gamer in the game, you know, which you don't see actually happening so much with other things, like, you know. But that was one thing that really appealed to me, and I wanted to keep that tone with the game.
Same here.
Awesome.
So, yeah, just real quick, when you were starting that, were you given a blank check and said, you know, do with what you will, or were you given parameters, or,
No,
and they didn't give you any kind of pushback or anything like that? You just said, do your thing?
I don't recall. It was a very long-term project. It ran for quite a lot of months.
That
but,
was my question, is how long did this take to do?
3 months. I mean, altogether, it actually took longer, but there were gaps where things would, you know, get interrupted and all that. But I would say, you know, 2 to 3 months of just solid sitting down and working through the whole thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't really given any instructions. They just wanted to redo Greyhawk, and I have a horrible feeling they would probably have taken anything.
Now, you did take input from the fan community, right?
Oh,
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
the America Online, the Greyhawk section of America Online, they really got involved. I mean, was
Mhm.
anybody in here with the AOL group? Oh, they were
Not
terrific.
me.
Yep.
What I used them for, and this was the best thing of all, was to bounce ideas off of. I would say, "What do you think about this?" And then they would say,
Yep.
"Oh, you're crazy." And I would say, "Well, how about this?" You know, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I got feedback.
Yeah, and there
which
was one
I
person who
desperately
would
needed.
become very into the industry later. Eric Mona, that was
Eric
one of
Mona,
these people
yeah.
that went.
Yeah.
Bingo.
That you were interacting with back then, I think.
Yeah, it made a huge difference to the production of the thing, to actually get it to what I hope was the quality everybody's been looking for, was to throw ideas out to the community, out to
Thank you.
the gaming
Awesome,
community,
Mike.
a small section
Yeah.
of it who were very outspoken. They were not shy about telling me I was an idiot. They did a lot, you know. But you know, when you want to make it work, you got to have that feedback, and you
Yeah.
have to have it constantly. So, you know, I would do a lot of writing. I would throw out some of the ideas. I would see what they thought of it. I would do some tweaking, you know, if there was a certain area that had to be done. You know, there was quite a bit
Yeah.
of stuff that went through. I can't remember anything specifically, but I know that there was a lot of stuff that kind of got wrenched in,
Mm-hmm.
and based on feedback from the campaign. That
Yeah.
helped a lot.
Yeah.
I can't say enough for the community, the AOL Greyhawk people. Great talk.
Almost be unthinkable today for the company to solicit fan input that
Well,
directly.
it went too far with Living Greyhawk, right? I'm not saying that in a negative way, but like it was every
Well, then
group
every
had- went their own direction. They couldn't manage it.
Yeah. Living Greyhawk was kind of different in
Yeah.
that sense that then it was each region had its own fan base
Yeah,
and its own
okay.
people that did things and modules or whatever that had very little oversight from above, so to speak. So that's something that you can tell both Paizo and Wizard of the Coast later have reined in their organized play much more when it comes to modules, and they're being vetted and published. And you can tell, I've read basically I think all of the modules and all the material from Living Greyhawk, and it varies in quality from not zero but down low. We need something for this Saturday game or this weekend's game, and it's probably like Monday, and you start writing things down, and it becomes much more of the technical, and then we need a backstory, and someone writes it in and had no clue of where it's supposed to be, to things that are written by Jason Bowman, Eric Mona, and a whole slew of great people that know Greyhawk inside and out, and could be some of the best things they ever written for Greyhawk. But that's what happens when you have probably hundreds of people that need to do it, for either spend months working on it or maybe 2 days or something like that in some cases. And it needs to be used at whatever gaming event that is coming up in 6 months or in 6 hours. Yeah.
We've had, go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, is there a question over here?
Yeah.
He did have his arm raised.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, but we have a question there. Yeah.
I was gonna say.
Well, comment.
Living Greyhawk, how did they try to manage like how events would transpire
That's a
amongst
good
the
question.
different groups?
So we've had every group on the talk show.
Most groups. There are a couple of
Yeah,
international groups we haven't
yeah,
covered,
most-
but we
yeah,
have covered a
US
lot of. But
yeah.
basically, we can say that you had a couple of core areas that were off limits, that were supposed to be Wizard of the Coast producing cool stuff, like the city of Greyhawk, Iron Gate, and a few other places that were supposed to be core part of the setting. Don't touch them. And there was also some villains and others, NPCs and stuff that were supposed to be core. And then they also had a series of core adventures, I think, per year, that were done by professional authors and vetted and were done like real products, so to speak. And then the rest was outsourced to these the regions did and oversight,
Triads,
and
triads.
then you had each areas triad, and in the beginning I think there seems to be way more oversight, and there were like plot lines were laid out and stuff like that. And then as the thing took off and became probably very much more popular than someone imagined, and there were more events going on and so on, then that, and people changed frequently. So some regions had probably good consistency and people that knew what they were doing. Other regions, we just need something this weekend. And I can tell because the product, the quality differs tremendously from region to region and year to year, so to speak. So it basically covers everything from fantastic to kind of disastrous.
And you had to play, if you
Yeah.
wanted to play in a certain area,
Yeah.
you had to go there physically.
Yeah, that was one thing.
across
And
the country.
and
So,
and there is
you know,
another
yeah.
aspect about
Yeah.
this. When you basically turn every realm of Greyhawk into its own micro setting or mini setting, that means that you have to have your half orcs and your elves and your halflings, everybody, all the
Yeah.
characters that could be played need to have a home in each of these, whether they had so thematically originally or not. That's why Shieldland had a little elven halfling community and a little forest popped up there somewhere, because the stories needed it, because people played halflings and elves and others that were never mentioned in originally. So things need to, they were kind of even out in that sense. So, but that was, I guess, more of the nature of the beast, so to speak. Once you start doing that, that happens. So that's perfectly understandable, but it's something, if you just come in and have read all the regular Greyhawk lore and then you start reading the Living Greyhawk, that is an aspect that struck me as very, very different thematically.
I think I would rather have demons overrunning the land.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why has that always been overlooked except by Living Greyhawk? The backgrounds and kingdoms of the demihumans. That's
That,
never been developed by anything from that I've seen in the regular books. That,
yeah. That,
Greek mentioned a few of the gods.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
That's it.
That struck me too. And there is, if you read the original box set, it says that Flannies is human centric. And I think it also might have something, and Roger is probably the one when can answer this more, but it seems like we have to realize that Greyhawk comes early in the age of D&D when it has strong roots into wargaming and the fantasy wargaming at its time, so to speak. And I think that the other races and cultures and stuff weren't as developed in the gaming when Greyhawk was written down. It evolved over time, so to speak. And my guess, another possible hypothesis, is that they didn't want to step on Tolkien and Middle Earth too much, so to speak. That might have been another thing. Yeah, I don't know.
that's
These are
what
that's
Sergeant
just a
did. That was the
that's just a
problem.
guess from my part. But when you read the old war game rules, then yeah.
Oh, what did I do?
No, I was
Oh,
just
you did.
thinking
Okay.
you're
Yeah.
the one that have been around the longest in these circles. So yeah.
That has been a perennial problem,
Yeah.
particularly in talking about Greyhawk, where the demi-humans definitely need their own kingdoms. Now, of course,
Yeah.
you got things like the Iron Hills,
Yeah.
and you have what are obviously very
Mhm.
strong demi-human, centers, Selene, the nation of Selene and the forest and everything like that, but they're not treated in the same way as like the
Yeah.
human kingdoms are, which is a real sad thing about that.
Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, halflings did not have any major areas, which is understandable. They even in Tolkien, the hobbits were, pretty minor
Yeah.
group, but dwarves and elves certainly deserved, having major areas. I would say the kingdom of Selene should have been definitely set up as a major power. There should have been a lot more about it, and I would say I hope I'm thinking of the right area, the Iron Hills and
Yeah.
Mort Mills and some of the other places
Yep.
where there were very heavy gnome and dwarf concentrations, particularly when they were fighting
Yeah.
major actions against orcs.
Yeah.
and
Someone's
goblins.
campaign, I recall, is in that area and has been there for 45 years, though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, you have a lot of
That's
Selene-
like
dwarves.
I've been-
dwarven years.
We,
yeah.
I have a knighthood in Selene that predates the Knights of Luna by 15
Oh,
years.
jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like I love
Yeah.
the area. I mean, that's where we play. We play in the Ulick States, Keeland,
Yeah.
Selene,
And-
Sus Forest,
Yeah.
Wild Coast. That's
Yeah. There is
That's
one
area.
other aspect that I think could play into this that just struck me is that when you read, especially the folio and especially the 83 box set, it's written by someone called Pluffet Smedgir the Elder in 900 CY from Relmord or
Yeah.
Roxas. Yeah, I think
Relmord.
Relmord. So in that sense, if you look at it like an historical document written by the conqueror, so to speak, or by someone from Grey Kingdom, which is kind of interesting in that. But so in that sense, it might simply be, if you read it not like the truth or like a factual stance, not like a lexicon, but if you read it like a situation report from someone sitting in a specific city with a outlook morally and politically and all of that, and then describing the world, they might, who's a human and sitting in an Iridian capital, so to speak, with that Erdi culture and all of that surrounding themselves, they might write about all the other realms that are equals or similar or something, and not about elves and weird dwarfs and halflings that no one knows about. So you can also not treat it as gospel truth or like that is factual. You can also treat it as that's one historic document, and then you can tweak it. That's another way of looking at it too, because it is stated like Pluffet Smedgir wrote it, so to speak. And
It's like
Yeah.
someone from today writing a role-playing game about
right.
like pre-colonial.
yeah,
whatever.
exactly, like 200-300 years ago
Yeah.
or something was.
I
yeah.
like the way it's written. I don't want someone to write the lore for me. I want to develop it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I think it's
Mhm.
great the way
Yeah.
it was written.
So it's basically
With
up
the
to you
gaps.
when you run your
Yeah.
games. Do you treat it like this is truth, this is what it is, or do you treat it like this is a source of inspiration that I can work from, so to speak? That's up to you when you homebrew what you want to do. Yeah.
So, apologies for the ignorance. I'm new here.
Great. No,
Uh,
please, welcome.
I don't, and I hope I'm not opening any old wounds or sort
There's
There are lots
there's
of them in
wounds
Greyhawk.
open. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
As the new guy,
Yeah.
why does it seems to me that WotC's put a lot of support behind Forgotten Realms, and there's Baldur's Gate, there's several Baldur's Gate video games, there's
Mhm.
a Waterdeep board game, it seems
Yeah.
to be very prevalent. Do you think some of the reasoning for that, because it's made perhaps easier for a player to take a box set and say, I don't have to come up with all this lore, I don't have to create all this backstory on my own, it's given to me. Is that maybe a reason, or maybe maybe everyone in the room knows what the answer to this is, and I'm sorry, I don't know if there's any kind of like internal conflict.
No, but it's a great question, and there are several reasons. One of them is that the switch from Greyhawk to Forgotten Realms is because when they ousted Gary Gygax from TSR, they probably didn't want to continue his legacy.
Okay.
They wanted an alternative to his legacy, and that's when the first big push for Forgotten Realms came, and Dragonlance and other
lateral
settings.
move.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've had, yeah,
Right,
then
right.
Greyhawk has managed to come back multiple times.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no bigger proponent of Greyhawk than Ed Greenwood. I'm going to tell you right now.
That's true.
Yeah.
He is such a.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done so much
Mhm.
for us to
Yep.
help us.
So yeah.
I was gonna mention, is like, there's a major tie-in between the two worlds, because Dragon Magazine had Elminster's.
Yep.
Exactly.
And that's
Yep.
what I was going
Yep.
to say.
And the
yeah.
Wizards 3.
Yep.
Was
Yeah.
that during your run, Roger?
Yep.
Yeah,
The
that
Wizards
was-
3 article.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
that's what our second seminar is with
Yeah.
Ed, crossing over.
Yep.
We're going to have that
Yep.
tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
Ed Greenwood had been developing Forgotten Realms, various smaller articles, monsters and things like that, but, what happened was Ken Mohan went to bat for him when they were looking for another world that they would work with other than Greyhawk and all that, because too many people, well, maybe not too many people, a great many people, saw that as, Gary's domain. So they came up with Ed Greenwood's thing. They bought him out for that, and also set him up to create more material for that. So he also had a very long-term
Yeah.
role-playing campaign which had been running for decades. Even at the time that the Forgotten Realm stuff started, it had been running for a very long time, and it was basically it jumped off from there. One of the things that's kind of made the difference between the two, and I promise not to beat this dead horse too many times, is that
It's wonderful.
the Forgotten Realms, unlike Greyhawk, went through a number of edition changes. It jumped from first edition to second edition, from second edition for AD&D to D&D third and 3.5 edition, and then jumped into D&D fourth edition, which sounds very boring, but actually it had a big effect on the campaign and on a lot of other campaigns, except, oddly enough, Greyhawk. Well,
Yeah.
I think maybe the Greyhawk Wars had something to do with the switch from first to second edition, but it had come up in Forgotten Realms discussions that how do you explain the change in the rules, and the basic way they decide was either a God's War or some major magic changing event. Mister gets killed, all these kinds of things, and so every time an edition changes, or the first one when it jumped from AD&D first edition to second edition, that was the time of troubles, where some of the gods were cast out. Various things happened for a few years, and you get all those. I can't remember the name, Avatar or something else.
Fates and
books.
Avatars?
Huh?
The book Fates and Avatars?
Not Fates and Avatars. I was trying to think of the particular period in Forgotten Realms history where the gods had to walk on the earth,
Time
and
of
all got
Troubles.
kicked out of
Yeah.
heaven.
Yeah.
That is Time of Trouble.
That was okay. Time of Troubles. Yeah, that was it. And they, and then when it jumped to third edition, what was it? There was some other goings on, but when the jump came to fourth and fifth edition, that was the spell
Plague,
the
yeah.
spell plague, the blue
Yep.
fire thing. At which point, it gets cut off. You can't play in it anymore, and that's why I was talking about. You can basically play from first edition materials all the way up to 3 and 3.5 D&D, and you've still got a coherent set, despite all the interruptions and everything. But then it jumps hundreds of years into the future, after that, to a revamped everything where the nations have been reshuffled like cards and everything. So.
Yeah.
That may have been too big a jump. I have heard that there was an enormous amount of negative, some positive, but there was a lot of negative perceptions from gamers about that.
Yeah,
It was like one disaster too many.
I never understood tying addition to changes and that kind of change. Rules are rules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Greyhawk just rolled through the whole
That's kind of one of the questions I had was, do you see it, because there's always on Discord, all that, what's the best start date, with Greyhawk?
Yeah.
Do you see
Uh,
it as
It's a good question.
problematic in a setting when the timeline does advance?